Again as we head into what does seem to be a rather unsettled weekend.
And it's only Monday. Right, I'm back with the latest from the BBC London newsroom in half an hour. There is, of course, plenty more on our website at the usual address, bbc.co.uk/London, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Good morning, welcome to breakfast with Dan Walker sorting out his tie and Steph McGovern.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock. Our headlines for you this morning. The suspect in the case of the murdered British backpacker Grace Millane appears in court. New Zealand's Prime Minister gives a tearful apology to her family.
Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that.
Theresa May comes under intense pressure to delay tomorrow's crucial vote on Brexit as she makes a final push to win over wavering MPs.
I'm at one of our biggest ports in Holyhead in Anglesey. These ferries just 3 hours away from Ireland. I'm looking at how those big decisions in Westminster will affect people here.
In sport, the Premier League says anyone racially abusing players deserves to be punished. It comes after disturbing scenes during Saturday's game at Chelsea involving the Manchester City striker Raheem Sterling.
Good morning from Hampton Court Palace. You're listening to the wonderful BBC singers. The weather outside is pretty cold. There's some frost in Scotland and northern England, a bit more cloud in the west, the brightest skies in the east. But I'll have more in 15 minutes.
What a lovely way to kick things off. It's Monday, the 10th of December. Good morning to you. Let's bring you more on our top story. Just gone 8 o'clock this morning, a man has appeared in court in New Zealand charged with the murder of the British backpacker Grace Millane.
The 26-year-old suspect, who has the right not to be identified under New Zealand law, has been remanded in custody. The country's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has given a tearful apology to Grace's family. Chichi Azunda reports.
It was a day no parent expects to face. A court date with the man accused of murdering their daughter. David Millane, Grace's father, did just that. The family's presence in court didn't go unnoticed by Judge Evangelos Thomas, who said their grief must be desperate. The 26-year-old man accused of killing Grace, who cannot be named for legal reasons, is due back in court next month. Court documents showed he had been living at the City Life Hotel in central Auckland, the last place Grace was seen alive. The court also heard how police believe the University of Lincoln graduate was the 1st and the 2nd of December. This is where the body believed to be Grace's was found, 10 metres off a countryside road outside the city. She was on a year-long around-the-world trip and had been in New Zealand for 2 weeks. Last night in Essex, people gathered to remember the lovely, outgoing, fun-loving 22-year-old, as described by her family. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was visibly moved by the case.
On behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that. I've advised the family through the police that if there is anything we can do to assist, we are here to help with that.
And this from Grace's brother Declan, posting pictures on his Instagram page alongside lyrics to You Are My Sunshine, highlighting the unbearable time for the Millane family. Chichi Azunda, BBC News.
Now, just one day before the Commons vote on Brexit, Theresa May is embarking on a final push to win over wavering Tory MPs.
She's going to hold a series of private meetings with backbenchers to try and limit the scale of the rebellion. She's also under pressure to delay the vote in the hope that she can win some EU concessions. Let's get the latest from our political correspondent, Chris Mason. Chris, I don't know why I went backbenchers there, apologies, but we've spoken to two Conservative MPs on the programme already today. One says they will vote with Theresa May tomorrow, one says they won't. Both seem to be denying that there's chaos around Parliament at the moment. So you're the political correspondent. What say you, sir?
There are bucket loads of chaos, Dan. It is absolutely everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's a big yellow bucket and it is piled full of chaos. And the two Conservative MPs we've had on breakfast this morning speak to that because, you know, it's the kind of first rule of parliamentary politics that people in the same party are meant to agree on big stuff. And as this morning has illustrated, they don't, and that is why the Prime Minister is in a quandary here. So we're now into double figures on the Mason Advent calendar. Sure, it's the same on the Walker Advent calendar. And yet, a political correspondent like me can't be certain, when Rudolph has munched on plenty of these, who will actually be Prime Minister when the big red man comes down the chimney. That's how up in the air politics is at the moment, and that's why we can't even be certain that this vote that we've been rabbiting on about for ages, it'll actually happen tomorrow, because it could be delayed. But let's assume it goes ahead. Here is the Brexit timeline as it looks at 8 o'clock on Monday morning. So MPs will debate all day today, or a decent chunk of today and tomorrow, for 8 hours each day on the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement. If it is rejected, which looks likely if the vote goes ahead on the current withdrawal deal, then there is 3 weeks, 21 days for the government to come back with a new plan. 21 days from tomorrow is New Year's Day. I'm not expecting they'll necessarily pop up as the fireworks die down over Westminster. They'll probably come back rather sooner than that. There's an added twist, there always is, isn't there, around Brexit. There'll be some more bumps in the road for the Prime Minister, or a Prime Minister, whoever that person is, because the Commons has pretty much decided that it will take charge of this process if the government's deal is rejected, because it'll be able to amend anything that comes back before it. So 4 weeks ago, Dan, I inadvertently managed to cause a little bit of a viral video on all things breakfast when I talked about not having the foggiest idea about what was going to happen. Well, you know, the mist is not clearing. We still simply do not know what's going to happen.
Chris, I have a couple of questions about your prop there. Is that your own carrot? Did you plan that, or was it you just found that somewhere?
No, I didn't plan on waving it around on the telly, but I did bring it in as part of my attempt to get my 5 a day and it not all to be fruit. So yeah, I did bring it in, washed at 4:30 this morning, and pretty tasty.
I now feel I need to look back through the archives to see if a political correspondent has ever used a carrot live on air before. I think you might be the first.
I'd like to hope I'm the first, and quite probably the last when my news editor has a word with me in about 30 seconds' time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. He's enjoying that carrot as well.
I want to know what else he's got under that desk.
Well, this morning we've got a live Radio 5 Live debate for you as well, looking at the detail of the PM's Brexit deal. That's going to be at 10 o'clock with Anna Foster. So I don't know whether you're a Bob and you're bored of Brexit, but it does feel, I know we've been saying this a lot, it feels like a really important week. And tomorrow it's a huge vote taking place. I think the vote's due to start around about 7 o'clock. Yeah. And Naga's going to be in Westminster for us tomorrow. And on Wednesday, depending on what happens, I think you're going to be in
the city. I'm doing an economics explainer tomorrow on it.
Oh, lovely. OK, so we're going to try and explain the significance of all these potential decisions, what might happen if the vote doesn't go through, what happens if the vote does pass, and we'll try and explain that throughout the week for you, because at times it is hard to get your head around it, isn't it?
I'm determined to get some of the vegetables into my coverage tomorrow.
I look forward to that tomorrow.
Right, let's have a look at some of the news this morning. High street shops suffered their worst November for almost a decade, with shoppers spending their money online instead. The British Retail Consortium says Black Friday deals on the internet made a difficult year for shops even worse. The decline in sales at the tills is expected to continue throughout the Christmas period.
The former Nissan chairman, Carlos Ghosn, has been officially charged by Japanese prosecutors with underreporting his income by tens of millions of dollars. The Brazilian-born businessman, who was arrested at Tokyo airport 3 weeks ago, is alleged to have understated his pay over a 5-year period by around £35 million. He denies that allegation.
The UK has more prisoners serving life sentences than any other country in Europe. That's according to a report by the Prison Reform Trust. It found British jails house just over 8,500 life sentence inmates, more than France, Germany and Italy combined. Along with Turkey, the UK accounts for 2/3 of Europe's life sentence prison population.
The reason that we have so many life sentence prisoners is that we don't distinguish in the country between different types of murder. So in most countries, if you have pre-planned a killing, you will be sentenced in a different way to if you haven't. In this country, that's left entirely down to the court to say on the minimum period that you must spend in prison. but you're liable to be recalled to prison for the rest of your life. And what's changed is that those minimum periods have almost doubled in the 15 years since Parliament passed the legislation in question.
Ministers from around 130 countries are gathering for the final week of the UN Climate Change Conference.
Yes, negotiators have been trying to agree on how to fulfil commitments to cut carbon dioxide emissions. It was a commitment made in Paris 3 years ago. Our environment correspondent Matt McGrath is at the conference in Poland, and earlier we asked him what the chances are of an agreement.
Well, I think until the end of the last week, things were looking pretty good. I think people were confident they'd started to make progress on the rule book, as it's called. But then over the weekend, there was a rather bitter row, if you like, between the US, Saudi Arabia, Russia and Kuwait and almost all the other countries over science. A scientific report that the UN had commissioned a couple of years ago. All the countries wanted to welcome it in, except the US and Saudi, who wanted to kind of keep it at arm's length. It led to a really, really difficult row, and it kind of has maybe set up a sour note for the start of the second week, when ministers are arriving today to try and move the agenda forward. And there's also a President Trump involved coal event here today, a side event if you like, that will see lots of people angry about the President putting his fingerprints, if you like, on the conference.
Yeah. There's also that question, isn't there, Matt, about the fact the UK is already struggling to hit the existing targets.
Yeah, the UK has been doing pretty well in terms of its legislation. It's put in place one of the few places in the world that has legislation to legally make targets achievable by governments, and it's been doing well on most of those. In the longer term, towards 2030, it gets a bit more tricky, but in many ways the UK kind of leads in terms of its legislation, and the government's been talking recently about putting in place legislation to make the UK carbon neutral by 2050, which again would be kind of world leading, and many other countries are looking to do something similar on that.
Now, in the last few minutes, the European Court of Justice has ruled the UK can stop Brexit without permission from other EU countries. Our reporter Adam Fleming is in Luxembourg. We'll be going to him shortly.
We're going to meet up with him. We spoke to him about an hour ago, and he was telling us about potentially what could happen. So they've ruled that, as Steph was saying, you can cancel Brexit without the permission of the other 27 EU members. This is because a group of anti-Brexit politicians and campaigners actually argued the UK should be able to unilaterally halt the Brexit process, if that's the case that they decide they want to do that. That was actually opposed by not only the UK government but also the EU itself. But we've just heard that the European Court of Justice has ruled that the UK can cancel Brexit without the permission of the other 27 EU members. We'll try and pick up with Adam Fleming a little bit later on in the programme about the detail of that and the significance of that as well.
Yes.
I think we might be able to get to him now, actually.
Oh, let's go to Adam Fleming now. Morning, Adam. Tell us about the significance of this. Thanks very much for suddenly jumping in front of the camera for us as well.
Yeah, just got a bit of a breaking news feel to what's happening. Yeah, we've just had the judgment from the European Court of Justice in the courtroom behind me. The courtroom was basically deserted, and it only took about 30 seconds, so it didn't really feel very exciting, but it is quite an important judgment. Here it is, 19 pages long. And the judges have ruled the way that we thought they would. They have said that a country, in this case the UK, that has notified the EU that it wants to leave, can change its mind without getting permission from the other 27 other EU countries, as long as the UK goes through some kind of democratic procedure to change its mind. That would be a vote in Parliament, a referendum, or a general election. And the judgment spells out that what that means is that the UK's terms of membership would remain unchanged. The EU would not be able to attach any conditions to the UK changing its mind, so it wouldn't be able to say, yeah, you can change your mind, but in order to do so, you've got to join the single currency, the euro, or the passport-free Schengen area. So the people that brought this case, which is a group of MSPs from Scotland, MPs from Westminster, and MEPs from the European Parliament, will be over the moon. They think this gives MPs another option when they vote, if they vote on Theresa May's deal tomorrow. It's a blow to the EU, who argued that this would cause perpetual uncertainty around the Brexit clause or the exit clause in the EU treaties, especially if other countries want to use use it, and it's a blow to the British government, who'd argued all along this was a hypothetical question because they had no intention of reversing Brexit, and that the judges here should butt out and it wasn't even a question for them. Well, they've decided it is, and they've decided that the UK could change its mind if it wanted to without asking.
So this sounds really significant, but Adam, do you think it'll make a difference to what's happening here now?
I think it may sway a few MPs if they vote tomorrow, because it now means that staying in the EU with the UK's membership terms unchanged, that is a real viable option. Before it was just a sort of an assumption or a maybe. Now it's written down by judges here at the EU's top court. But the fact is, for the Brexit process to be reversed, think how much would have to change in British politics. Not least the fact you'd have to have Theresa May, the Prime Minister, and the entire government changing its mind about the biggest bit of policy it is pursuing at the moment. So on a bit of paper is one thing, it actually happening in political reality, a totally different thing.
Do you know what, Adam? I always love the fact you managed to get through all these documents so quickly for us. So thank you very much once again for doing that for us, Adam. He's got a good old file system, apparently, all colour-coded. He's really on it.
Well, you've got to be, because everything can change in a heartbeat at the moment.
Yeah.
So as Adam was talking, it's a significant development from the European Court of Justice, but as Adam was sort of explaining there, whether it will actually make that much difference is another argument entirely. So it's 16 minutes past 8. Good morning. We're trying to keep you up to date with absolutely everything this morning. Have a look at this beautiful shot we've got from Holyhead this morning. We've got Sean there talking about how Brexit will affect business, and that business in particular. What an absolutely gorgeous sunrise that is.
Really beautiful, isn't it? It's picture perfect. And also picture perfect is Carol's view at Hampton Court Palace this morning. Look at that, a roaring fire. Morning.
Good morning. Isn't it gorgeous? Can you hear it crackling away as well? We're now in the kitchen, and this is actually the largest surviving 16th century kitchen in the world. This fireplace still used, you can see the spit around it for cooking today. But this is the kind of fare you could have expected in the Victorian era. So if we have a look at it, a mince pie. If I remove all of this foliage and holly, this is what the mince pie would have looked like when it was cut open, and also some puddings. Now, in those days, if Henry VIII's entourage, for example, was in town, he would have maybe 1,000 guests. 200 cooks would be employed from dawn till dusk in this kitchen, and it got so hot and so sweaty, you can imagine, with all the ovens on and the fire on and all these people, that they actually cooked in their underwear. And there were 3 master cooks, one for the king, one for the queen, and one for the rest of the court. Now this morning, it's chilly outside if you haven't yet ventured out. There's some frost across parts of Scotland and also northern England. And what we have today is a largely dry day, bright in the east, but cloud coming in from the west. So that nice bright start you've seen in Holyhead this morning, later on will be a cloudier picture. Now, high pressure is still across us. We have a ridge of high pressure across us, keeping things fairly settled. And that's what's allowed the clear skies by night and the temperature to tumble, hence the frost. Already it's cloudy in Northern Ireland, and that cloud will continue to roll over towards western Scotland, northwest England, Wales and also southwest England, turning the sunshine hazy ahead of it as it does so. So the brightest skies today are going to be in the east. Now temperatures today, nothing to write home about. We're looking at roughly between 4 in the north to highs of about 12 as we come down towards the south. Through this evening and overnight, all that cloud in the west continues its journey, moving eastwards. It will be the eastern extremities of the UK that remain clear. So here it's going to be coldest, with temperatures again freezing or just below. But if you're under the cloud, well, once again, temperatures won't be as low, but it's going to be fairly murky. Today we could see some showers out of that cloud. Tonight we could as well as some drizzle. So a murky start to the day, first thing tomorrow. So tomorrow we've got the brightest skies in the east. We have all this cloud continuing to come over from the west towards the east, so the sunshine eventually will be eradicated and the cloud will be thick enough, as I mentioned, for some drizzle and a lot of low cloud just hanging over the hills. Temperatures very similar to what we're going to have today. By the time we get to Wednesday, once again, there still will be a fair bit of cloud around, but we'll see some breaks in it, we'll see some sunshine coming through, but there is a weather front waiting in the wings in the west, and that is going to introduce some rain. Temperature-wise, similar to what we're expecting today and also tomorrow. Back to you too.
Carol, I've noticed there's a fair few outfit changes going on. Is that the kind of pressure of being in the royal environment?
No, it's dashed chilly outside, Steph. If you haven't been out yet, and we're moving from room to room, and the fire's now lit, so it'll be nice and warm in here later.
Oh, thanks, Carol.
I'm slightly mesmerised by that pie behind Carol this morning.
I thought you were going to say the fire.
Oh, no.
The pie.
The pie looks magnificent. It's 8:20. Good morning. Watching breakfast from the BBC. Now, over the past few weeks, you'll have noticed that Louise has not been sitting here. There is good reason for that, though, because she's not been on the sofa, because she's been on a proper adventure.
Yeah. I mean, it's not my idea of an adventure, to be honest, because she's been taking part in a gruelling ultra triathlon in Chile.
We're delighted to say we'll be talking to her, hopefully, shortly, but this is how she did it.
Oh, I've done the bell. Oh my God. Oh, brilliant. I made it.
That's ringing the bell. We've given her a bell this morning as well. I think we've woken her up. Louise, congratulations. How's the holiday?
Oh my goodness me. Yes, I've done a little bit cooking. You have woken me up. Yeah, summer holidays been such an amazing adventure. And I'm sitting here thinking, I mean, yesterday I was questioning my life choices when I got on that ferry to dive off into the cold water. And now my feet, I think, are the most sore, but I'm not sure. I think there's quite a lot of soreness.
Oh, honestly, Lou, I honestly don't know how you do it, but 16 hours. Talk us through it. How was it?
I'm just looking at my time, so 16 hours and 34 minutes. So how was it? We woke up at 1:30 in the morning, then went to this ferry, and we arrived at this dock, and it was pitch black, and this enormous ferry was lit up. So I got on the ferry with, I think there was about 200, 250 of us, all dressed up in our wetsuits. And we drove out into the dark, into this beautiful field. Of course, we couldn't see it then because it was dark. And then waited on the ferry for about 20 minutes. Before then they put down the, I can't even think of what it's called, the gate of the ferry. And we all started jumping in, and we're told we had to swim to a ship, a Navy ship, which was about 2 kilometres away, swim to that ship, which you could hardly see, turn around it, and then swim to shore. And so I was a bit scared, obviously, of the cold, of the water, of the waves, so I kind of waited a little bit at the back. By the time I got in, everybody else had started, so I had to catch up with them. Anyway, it was an amazing, absolutely amazing swim, and I was very nervous, and Dan and Steph, you both know, I was most nervous about that, actually, because orcas swim in that fjord, so I was a little bit worried I was going to see some orcas and killer whales, which I didn't. I'd love to see them, obviously, but I didn't. Yeah, and then did a good swim, and then got on my bike. So I think it's something, I'm just looking at it now. Nearly 8 hours on my bike.
Dear me. I mean, Louise, I know you said we spoke a lot about before you went. I know you were a bit worried about that swim in particular, but you have been a real inspiration to so many people who have been following your trip there and your journey on social media as well. I mean, just watching the pictures of you, not only you've done this, you swim for like over an hour. How do you, I know you've done lots of training, but how do you then convince your legs to get you on a bike and then do the run after that? Mentally, it must be so tough to get yourself through something like that.
It is, and the worst thing was, I knew, Dan, you know, I knew it was going to be really tough, but actually I kind of didn't know how tough it was, because the bike was beautiful and it was fantastic, but it was really, really, and I think we climbed something like 2,500 meters in that bike, and you've just got to keep, I mean, I have silly things like just keep moving, keep pedaling, that's all I could do, and so I did that, and then, but the run, so I got off my bike, and obviously I've been a long time on the bike, really enjoyed some of it, was incredible. I mean, the views of the glaciers and the beautiful Patagonian plains were just fantastic. So that keeps you going. And then your training keeps you going because, you know, I've done lots of bike rides and think, right, okay, this is a bit like a hill that I do in North Wales, except the hills just kept on coming. And then I got on the run, and I thought it was going to be fine, and I didn't realise. I knew it was beside a glacial lake. I didn't realise it was in a mountain track by a glacial lake. We were on the track for 42 kilometres, and my feet had bruised. And I think, what do you think about? I think about the end. I think about all the training that I've done. I think that you know, every step is a step closer to the end. And the amazing thing about this race is you have someone, you can only do it if you have someone supporting you and helping you. And my husband was doing that, so every step, every pedal, I knew that I was getting closer to the moment that I'd see him again. And hopefully he'd have a cup of tea, which he did, or a sandwich. So yeah, training and just sheer, utter, just keep moving determination, I think.
So, Lou, the thing I love about you is every time you've done one of these amazing achievements in triathlon, I always think, right, you're going to have a break now, aren't you? But you never do. What are you doing? Have you got plans for the next one already? I bet you have.
You've got to come back on the sofa at some stage.
First of all, I've got to mend all the bits that are a little bit broken. I've got to be able to walk properly because I can't, I'm just hobbling at the moment. No, definitely, literally, normally, as you say, Steph, you're so right. I get over the finish line, I think, right, what's next? I got over that finish line, I thought, thank goodness for that. I promise I'm going to have a rest now, but I will be back at breakfast.
Good. We have missed you, Lou, but we're dead proud of you. Thank you so much for chatting to us. Sorry for waking you up.
Oh, I'll go straight back to sleep, don't worry. Thanks so much.
Well done, Louise. She's like Wonder Woman, isn't she?
Yeah.
Amazing. And for those of you who've been following her, she's so proud to have finished that. She's been worried about it, particularly the swimming part of it. But she's been wanting to do that for years, so well done, Louise Minchin. Just to let you know what we've still got to come for you between now and 9:15, a bit of this.
How have they not managed to age? That's what I want to know. That's Ronan, Shane, Keith and Mikey. They're going to be here on the sofa with us. Of course, Boyzone.
We'll also be joined with, promise you, John Barnes this morning. We do hope he's going to be here. He's just stuck in a bit of traffic for you, but we're going to talk to John Barnes about what Raheem Sterling has been talking about over the weekend and about whether the British media have a role to play in stoking racial hatred. We've got that. Sally's going to be outside with the Formula E car. Loads to pack in, but right now let's get news, travel and weather wherever you're watching.
Up next on the BBC News Channel, a look at what's happening in the world of global business with Business Live. And in half an hour, it's the news at 9 with all the latest stories.
Hello there, good morning. Later on this week, we're going to see a battle between some mild air trying to come in from the west and cold air heading in from the east. But before that, it's a fairly quiet start to the week, really. Plenty of dry weather around today, but the cloud will slowly increase from the west. And you can see from the satellite imagery where you've got some clearer skies towards many central and eastern areas, a bit more in the way of cloud across into the Atlantic and western parts. That's just associated with this warm front, which is going to gradually move its way in, but it's a very slow process because high pressure is the dominant weather pattern, really, for many of us today. So it's a bright start to the day, lots of sunshine, a few showers drifting their way through the northeast and Northern Ireland, through into Merseyside, potentially even into the Midlands as well. The cloud generally increasing towards these western parts. Temperatures 8 to 11 Celsius here, about 6 to 9 degrees further east where you have the best of the sunshine. Through tonight, well, we keep some sunny spells, clear spells, I should say, across eastern parts. Still more cloud the further west you are, and that's going to keep temperatures above freezing. But where you have those clearer skies across the eastern parts, you can see there by the blues on the map, there's going to be a bit of a frost developing on Tuesday morning. Temperatures just below freezing, -1, -2 Celsius, compared to the 5 to 7 degrees in these western parts. During Tuesday, quite a cloudy day really for many of us. Any early morning sunshine, that will start to get eroded away as cloud generally starts to move its way in. A few breaks developing here and there across western parts. Rain just sitting out towards the west. It'll stay here during Tuesday, so dry for all of us really, and temperatures about 7 to 11 Celsius. Now that's a weather front. As we go into Wednesday, will just edge its way ever slowly eastward, but as it does so, it will tend to break up really. So we'll just see a line of cloud really, a few spots of rain on that during Wednesday. But Wednesday again, a fairly quiet day, a mostly cloudy day before it turns colder by Thursday. Bye-bye.
Hello, this is Business Live from the BBC with Sally Bundock and Ben Thompson.
Europe's highest court says it's OK for the UK to stop Brexit as Prime Minister Theresa May vows to try and win support for her deal to leave the EU.
We're live, we're in London, and that is our top story today, Monday the 10th of December. On the eve of the UK Parliament's vote on Theresa May's Brexit deal, the European Court of Justice has just ruled that the UK government can pull out of Brexit without the agreement of the other 27 EU countries. Also on the programme, the Nissan boss Carlos Ghosn has been formally indicted and rearrested over allegations of financial misconduct. We'll have the details. And shares in the outsourcing firm Interserve, they slumped 75%, ignore that 1%. They're down much more heavily. The British firm that has thousands of contracts to provide everything from hospital cleaning to school catering says a rescue plan will involve massive debt restructuring.
Yes, I can tell you Interserve shares down nearly 60% to 10 pence. But we are talking ketchup as well. Red, brown, mayo or mustard. We're going to talk to a company that's trying to take on the big players in sauces. It's an industry worth billions of dollars. And also, have you ever been mistakenly called the wrong name at work, all because your name sounds like a popular brand? Do get in touch. Some BBC research has found that in the age of autocorrect, this kind of thing is more common than you think and has big implications. Do get in touch. Use the hashtag BBC BizLive.
Hello to you and welcome to Business Live. Now, we often say that it is a crucial week as far as Brexit is concerned. Well, and of course Theresa May's plans to push through her Brexit plan, but a historic vote on her Brexit deal in Parliament tomorrow, alongside an announcement this morning, really could determine the UK's future and possibly the premiership of Theresa May. Well, the British Prime Minister has resisted pressure to delay a vote on the withdrawal deal, despite a large number of MPs indicating that they will not support it. In the last half hour, the European Court of Justice has ruled that the UK government can scrap Brexit without the agreement of the other 27 EU countries. So that's a ruling, but we should check why they would actually want to do so. Well, the value of the pound against the US dollar has been some of what investors make of Brexit. The steep fall, well, you see there, was all to do with that vote that happened back in 2016, and as you can see, it's been a pretty rocky road, but a downward trend ever since. Theresa May is struggling to get parliamentary support and backing for the deal that she has agreed with the EU. Well, a lot of concern in Parliament surrounds the Northern Ireland border and what would happen to goods that are traded over that border if the UK and EU can't reach a deal. Trade over that border was worth more than $3.4 billion in 2016. Sally.
Thank you, Ben. So that's a reminder of some of the key sticking points. We've got Jonathan Portes with us, a senior fellow at in the UK and Changing Europe. It's good to see you, Jonathan, as per usual. So let's talk about the European Court.
the Brexit debate in Parliament in the UK needed to know before we decide what our options were. So I think this will certainly strengthen the hand of people who say, actually, you know, the decision we made 2 years ago isn't irrevocable. We can change our mind if we want to. So it's likely to strengthen the hand of those who want either a radically different approach to Brexit or perhaps another referendum.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, actually. You know, what could this do when we get that crucial vote? Could it sway a few hands that maybe were sort of borderline before, that this is now a real viable option? It could happen, and therefore if they were a bit borderline before, they might just actually press the button on it.
I think that's possible, because there's been quite correctly a lot of talk saying, well, a referendum, you can't call a referendum overnight. The Electoral Commission has to decide what the question is. There are all sorts of procedures. There has to be a campaign and so on. So in some ways this makes it a lot easier, because this means that we can say to the EU, well, either give us enough time for that, or we'll unilaterally take enough time to make our own mind up. It also changes the argument in another way. Some people have said, well, you know, if we had to go crawling back to the EU, they might require us to join the single currency, to join the Schengen no borders area, take away our rebate. And actually the Court of Justice said quite clearly that cannot happen. If we went back, if we revoked, it would be on exactly the same terms, exactly the same deals we have now.
Jonathan, thank you again, as ever, a regular here on the BBC, telling us your thoughts on what's going on. Jonathan Portes there, and of course we're across this week, every twist and turn throughout the days, and there's so much more information on our website, jargon busting, explanation of what terms mean, etc. Do take a look to make sense of all of this.
Yeah, and we'll keep an eye on any reaction to that ruling from this morning, bring it right here to you on the BBC. But let's bring you up to date with some of the other stories making headlines in the business world. The mobile operator O2 is understood to be seeking millions in damages from supplier Ericsson after last week's day-long data network collapse in the UK. According to the Telegraph newspaper this morning, the total bill could hit $130 million. Ericsson blamed expired software certificates for the problem.
The ride-sharing firm Uber's reportedly filed paperwork for its initial public offering. It's racing with small arrival Lyft to be the first to sell shares publicly on the financial markets. And if both plans do shape up, it could prove to be among the biggest market flotations of 2019.
Huawei's chief financial officer Meng Wanzhou is fighting to be released on bail after she was arrested on the 1st of December in Vancouver. She's also fighting an extradition request to the United States. China has lodged a strong protest over her arrest.
Now to Japan, where in the last few hours prosecutors have charged the former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn with financial misconduct.
Yeah, they say that Mr. Ghosn underreported his compensation in the company's financial statements. That's over a 5-year period. Well, Rupert Wingfield-Hayes is following this story for us. He's in Tokyo. Rupert, an interesting development, but one that will not make things any easier for Carlos Ghosn.
No, Ben, it certainly won't. It means effectively that Carlos Ghosn is going to be spending Christmas and possibly New Year as well in Japanese detention. Certainly Christmas, because his rearrest today after he was charged means that Japanese prosecutors can hold him for another 20 days to continue questioning him on the same but different allegations. This is the weird thing about this today, is he's been charged with underreporting his package, if you like, from Nissan from 2011 to 2015, and he's been rearrested today on allegations that he did the same thing from 2016 to 2018. Now, people I've talked to here said that's essentially the same offence that he's being accused of twice, and one former prosecutor told me if they're going to do this, then it shows that the case against him is pretty thin, and questioned why he was being arrested in the first place.
And in terms of the company, Rupert, tell us where we're at, because obviously it's been in turmoil since this story first broke a few weeks ago.
That's right, Sally. I think from day one we've known, or at least that we've been saying, that behind this arrest of Carlos Ghosn is another story, which is a deep rift between the French parent company Renault, which owns 43% of Nissan, and the internal management of Nissan Motor Corporation. And it's essentially over the balance in ownership and the balance in control between the two companies. It's an alliance, but it's one where the French have had the upper hand for the last 20 years. And Nissan being a bigger, more profitable company, there has been a growing feeling that they want to regain control. And this has really brought it out into the open. And indeed, over the weekend, there have been media reports in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere suggesting that Mr. Ghosn, according to sources inside Nissan, before Mr. Ghosn was suddenly arrested last month, he was planning to remove the chief executive officer of Nissan Motor Corporation, Mr. Saikawa, the man who in the end brought down Mr. Ghosn.
Yeah, Rupert, I know you're going to follow that story for us, but for now, thank you. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes there, following the fortunes of the former Nissan boss live from Tokyo. Well, let me show you the numbers, because Japan not having a great session. Stocks there falling to what is a 6-week low. The economy reporting a deeper than expected contraction. That's in the third quarter of the year. You see the market down by more than 2%. That sell-off that we got on Friday as well from Wall Street, quite a lot for investors to contend with. If you look at these numbers, actually since, well, the Japanese market down about 13%, just over 13% from a 27-year high that it hit back in early October. So some suggesting there was only one way to go, and that was down. In Asia, it's Nissan that really is in the spotlight, of course, as Rupert has just been telling us there. Investors trying to work out what all of that means for what is one of the biggest organisations there. Now, in Europe, markets digesting that news we've had within the last half hour from the European Court of Justice, confirming that the UK can actually remain in the EU and scrap its Brexit plans without the agreement of the other 27 members. We've been discussing that at the start of the programme. But remember too, tomorrow MPs will vote on Theresa May's withdrawal agreement, which seems to have little support. And if that wasn't enough, remember this morning we'll also get the latest reading on economic growth for the UK. We'll get manufacturing, construction, production, output figures all released at the same time at 9:30 this morning, so in about 50 minutes time. Lots for us to crunch over. Jane Foley is standing by to do just that. But first, let's take you to New York, where Samira has the details of what's ahead on Wall Street.
On Monday, American investors will be looking for calmer waters after last week's storms. Just a reminder of how volatile last week was. On Thursday alone, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by more than 750 points, only to regain most of those losses by the end of the day. There were many reasons for investors being so skittish. Trade tension between the U.S. and China. The latest jobs report showed that the labor market didn't create as many jobs as investors expected. And, of course, reaction to the possibility of a recession. Many will be watching what happens on Monday on U.S. markets. Also happening this week, we get the latest inflation numbers on Wednesday and retail sales on Friday.
A lot going on. That's Samira based in New York for us. We've got Jane Foley with us, senior currency strategist at Rabobank. Jane, a critical week ahead. Give us your thoughts.
It's a huge week really for the UK, certainly, but I think for broader stock markets too, for market sentiment, again, really important time. If we look at stock markets today, well, they're in the red again, and the markets are extremely concerned, both about the prospect of maybe a US recession going into 2020, but certainly the impact of trade wars and the impact of that on the global economy. So there are concerns of slower growth looking ahead. If we look at Europe, we've got France, obviously loss of appetite for structural reform there. We've got European parliamentary elections next year as well. They could show us even more populism. And so a lot of concerns really on the horizon. But I think this week it will be all about the UK.
I touched on the pound at the start there, Jane, given what we've seen since the vote in 2016, and it's sort of been pretty up and down, but heading in one direction. That's been down, hasn't it? What will investors make, or certainly the currency markets make, of that ruling this morning, that the UK could scrap its Brexit plans without agreement of the 27 other members?
It could. Now, you could argue that on the margin, of course, that makes the prospect of a hard Brexit less likely, because you'd think that surely if the politicians thought that that was the only option left in March, they would reverse. Now that should be some comfort, or provide some comfort really for sterling, for UK investors, because the very idea of a hard Brexit is very, very negative. But if you look at sterling over the last couple of days against the euro, it has dropped in price, and that is again a reflection of how nervous the market is about